Hi, my name is Dwayne Gathers, and welcome to CivitasLA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. These bi-weekly conversations enable us to hear from, learn from, and be inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Our goal is to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across the greater Los Angeles region while elevating diverse and emerging voices in that conversation. November is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive brain disorder affecting more than 6.2 million Americans, according to the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and this number is expected to rise to nearly 14 million by 2060. Another important piece of info shared by the foundation shows that more than 11 million American caregivers provide over 15 billion hours of unpaid care. November is also National Entrepreneurship Month, a time, as shared in a proclamation from the White House, to celebrate entrepreneurs who, quote, combine passion, resilience, and ingenuity to solve hard problems and create products and businesses that improve our lives. Bridging these two opportunities to create awareness, CivitasLA is joined in studio at Emerson College in the heart of Hollywood this morning by Dani Klein Modisett, founder and CEO of Laughter on Call. Founded in 2019, Laughter on Call was created in order to pair comedians with those experiencing Alzheimer's and to create connections through shared laughter. We're excited to have Dani with us to discuss the founding evolution of Laughter on Call, first not only in the healthcare space addressing Alzheimer's patients and their needs, but also expanding this important work into the corporate arena with a mission to foster greater mental health and awareness through shared laughter. Dani, welcome to CivitasLA.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited to be here.
Well, Dani, first of all, thank you. I appreciate you being with us, and I'm going to share with our audience first and foremost that I have not seen Dani Klein since we both graduated from Dartmouth many, many years ago. So, Dani, great to see you again.
Yes,
it's been all these years.
Exactly, I know.
Indeed. So great to know that you're here in Los Angeles. Dani, we always appreciate on CivitasLA if our guests can offer a brief personal introduction.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so I'm Dani Klein Modisett, comedian, writer, actor, and most recently, entrepreneur, as you said. And I'm really happy to be here to talk about all things LA and laughter, and especially with someone who knew me when in another life. Not a past life.
I know.
Could be past life because this is LA, but I don't mean that. A previous life.
Well, I think, our paths did cross many years ago, but, I was over in the economics and government arena, and I think you were over there with the creatives, and our paths probably didn't cross as much those years ago. So I'm glad that we're both now in the creative arena. So thank you for being here. Dani, before we dive into our conversation, we always appreciate getting to know our guests a little bit through the lens of their Los Angeles in these lightning round questions. So I know you and your family have been here for a while. So share with us a few insider hotspots for our listeners here and everywhere else. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. We always love food. We always love great restaurants across our region. Share with us a favorite restaurant or two.
Okay, so I really love Blair's in Atwater. That was really important during COVID because they had outdoor seating. So,
Okay.
And they have wonderful, lots of different, mostly Italian-focused food, but yummy. The
Okay.
bread, really good. And also, of course, Tam O'Shanter. Where would LA be
Oh,
without
right.
Tam O'Shanter supporting the Scottish heritage?
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, give us a favorite place to take a sip, whether that's coffee, tea, cocktail, champagne, whatever it is that you drink.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I'm in the coffee camp, and I love Proof Bakery on Glendale Boulevard. They have amazing coffee and the best croissant. If you're a croissant person,
Yes, I love an almond croissant
Yes.
myself. That's my favorite.
yes.
Okay, favorite place to take a visitor.
I really love the Broad Museum. That's like a modern art mecca. And I also love the whole Eli Broad's whole backstory. He wrote a book, so that's available. And then, of course, Malibu. Just Malibu.
Okay.
It never gets old to me. I'm from the East Coast, as you know, so Malibu.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, well, we love the Broad Museum indeed. Give us, we love our outdoor space here in Los Angeles, so give us a favorite park or a hike. Are you a hiker at all?
Oh, yeah, of course. We
okay.
live right near Griffith Park. So
Okay.
I would say, go to the carousel, the old carousel, hang a left, and there's like 100 different possible hikes.
Outstanding.
So, yeah, love that.
Indeed. Well, again, as we move beyond the pandemic and people are gathering again in public, we always love celebrating community through numerous activities and events. Give us a favorite activity or community event for you and your family.
Right. So you talked about Alzheimer's. Obviously, that's my bailiwick. And there is the Los Angeles Alzheimer's Association Walk. It's actually the Alzheimer's Association Walk, not the Los. There's two Alzheimer's associations in Southern California.
Okay.
So this is the Alzheimer's Association Walk. It'll be November 5th at the zoo. And we're actually running like warm-ups for everybody to get them going. But that's like a wonderful community builder.
Yeah.
And we have people flying in from around the country for that.
Well, make sure we get, not to interrupt you, but make sure we get information on that. We'd love to promote that as we release this episode. That would be great to share.
Sure. And I also love the Christmas dinner. There's a Christmas dinner that's done with Temple Israel of Hollywood and the United Methodist Church. It's like a combined effort, a collab, yes. I think the kids say.
It's a collab,
It's a collab, and it's like 1,000 free meals and toys and a real community effort that's really fantastic.
It's I laugh, not to share that I think that collaboration has gone on for about 30 years actually between those two stations, and I will share with you as we move into this holiday season. Wow, this is episode 79. I'm going to share with you that we have Rabbi Mari and Reverend Kathy coming on CivitasLA together.
Get out!
To talk about that. Absolutely.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yes. Well, I've known that because I actually was president of the board of trustees at Hollywood UMC for 3 years.
Oh, come on.
And have been a member there for over 10 years. So I reached out to Reverend Kathy about that. So we're really excited to have them both on our podcast.
That's amazing. Yeah, I just had lunch with Rabbi Mari. She's really great. She's a special person.
And she shared with me, which I'm going to be attending, is that an event at the temple on December 8th, I believe.
Yes, that's mine.
What's happening then?
We're doing a live storytelling show, funny stories, and it's called Really God. And it's stories where you got to a place in your life where you were like, really? Really? And then you live to laugh about it. So, and we are chock full of the most funny, entertaining professionals. And so everyone signed on to tell fun stories. It's going to be a great night. That's so cool.
It's on my calendar.
Oh, that's
cool. Amazing. So, Dani, let's get into our conversation here this morning here. The genesis of Laughter on Call, as I understand it in our conversations previously, was a very personal story to you and your family. Share with us the story of your mother, Muriel, and her struggles with Alzheimer's and how that led to the founding of this endeavor.
Sure. So about 8 years ago, I was on tour with a book. I wrote this book about laughter and marriage called Take My Spouse, Please.
Okay.
And it is about staying. And so I was on the road with that, and I got a call from one of my mother's friends saying, your mother is arguing about checks with waiters and can't fill out a deposit slip. So my mother was living in New York City. I was living here. And I thought, arguing with waiters, that's really not out of character. But not being able to fill out a deposit slip, okay, that sounds weird, because my mother was very involved with real estate and money and definitely knew her way around a deposit slip. So I went to New York, met my sister there, and we realized, okay, there was definitely something wrong. And we had her evaluated at the Martha Stewart Center, which is a wonderful place in New York if you need that ever. Mm-hmm. And she had Alzheimer's. And so several years went by, and I was on tour with that book that I mentioned, and I would set up a team for her, and she would fire everybody. This is very common with early Alzheimer's, where they don't want to accept that there's a problem. Mm-hmm. We put a team in place. She'd fire everybody. Anyway, ultimately, it got to a place where she wasn't leaving the apartment. And, it was $17,000 a month to keep her in with all the care that she needed and her monthly nut. And so my sister and I spoke, and we were like, okay, let's bring her to California to be close to me. I had young children at the time, and California, it's LA, beautiful. Yeah. So we got her here. We brought her to a place called Silverado, Beverly Place, which has a very specific, they only do memory care, and it's a very specific approach. So one of the challenges that I found with senior communities is that they have memory care areas, but they're memory care areas. that we whisper about and we kind of walk by and say, oh, those are the memory people and they have to be isolated. And it just did not feel comfortable to me. But Silverado, their whole game is memory care. So you walk in and it's like really open policy, dogs and kids. And the two men who created it believe that their mission is to turn fear into love. Big open space with a chandelier. And I was like, oh, chandelier. She's going to feel like she's in a Upper East Side building.
Okay.
And so initially she was fine. And then within a couple of weeks, I think she realized she wasn't leaving. And she became depressed and withdrawn. And she wasn't eating. And I felt terrible about this. I felt very guilty. And I was at my dentist who, of course, because it's LA, she's also like a life coach.
Okay.
And I was like, and I was crying and she wasn't drilling. And I said, oh, I just wish, I don't know. I just wish I could hire a comedian to cheer her up. And the woman was like, oh, wait, that's a great idea. Why don't you do that? You should do that.
Wow.
And so I went home and I put up on Facebook, looking for comedian interested in gerontology, paid gig. Because I want someone to respond. And my phone rang immediately. It was a friend in New York who said, I just saw that, and I have a friend in LA who wants to work with seniors. She's a comedian. She's sitting on park benches. You should talk to her. So I brought the woman over, and she came and she sat down with my mother, and she did instinctively so much of, we train now, but she got at eye level with her, and she looked her right in the eye, and she told the truth. And she said, I know. You don't want to talk to me. No, you're probably thinking, who is this schmuck just talking to me? And there was something about the word schmuck that my mother's face, like she just lit up and started laughing. And then the comedian was like, schmuck, comedians, we know, like, you got to keep going. So it was like, schmuck, schmuck, schmuck. It was like this schmuck off, they're laughing. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want. This is exactly what I want. And then she handed my mother a glass of water, and there was this connection made. So I hired the woman for 8 hours a week to come and make her own schedule. And it really did affect my mother's end of life care. Like, she started eating again and being a participant in her community. She just felt less isolated in her disease. And even in that first moment, I was like, oh no, this has to be everywhere.
That's amazing.
Like, I have to do something with this because there's always comedians that need work.
Sure.
And, there's as you stated in the opening, like, there's an ever-growing population of people that are going to need this kind of support.
Right.
So that's how it all started.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, Dani, talking about, certainly the role of elder care workers, there was a study done here in Los Angeles, Filipina elder care workers providing these amazing services, and the majority of them cited companionship as their top job responsibility over activities of daily living like bathing and feeding. But you wrote an article for AARP about the impact that the comedian had on your mother, and then that made you realize that your mother needed more than just mere companionship. So tell us more about your organization's work with Alzheimer's patients and the various approaches you've taken.
Right, yes. So that article was amazing because what happened was I got hundreds of responses from around the world to please bring a comedian. Could you please bring me a comedian to connect? And so then we systematized training with our comedians. I found a whole concurrent parallel universe of compassionate comedians, right? Because you're not going to send Dave Chappelle and God bless him, but it's not that kind of humor. It's a certain type. It's called affiliative humor. If we're going to get scientific, and it's about creating connection specifically. So we have a whole intake process that we do with the families. So we get to know, what did they love? What were they passionate about? Were there any pets that they loved? And just a whole music, art, all of that. So that the comedian comes in kind of armed with information that they can then talk to them about and share personal stories. So much of it is about creating the connection. That's what we're looking for. So it's interesting because, of course, the company's called Laughter on Call, right? But that's really because I couldn't call it cognitive engagement on call. Nobody's interested in that, right? But so laughter's really the way in, but the goal really is to connect and have these people be drawn out of isolation and feel seen and heard. And that's another challenge in Alzheimer's, is that people will talk over them and be like, yeah, she doesn't look the way she should or whatever, and forget that they are fully present, even though they aren't able to communicate the way we were familiar with them communicating, they're still very much there. And so that's another part of what we bring is total focus on the person and taking them in and making them feel special and seen. And also, we have the whole process of like, okay, so you ask questions, but you don't, as soon as you feel that the question is going to create any kind of agitation, you pull back and share something about yourself. That's why comedians are so great, because we can monologue and we're used to kind of having to storytell and speak just quickly off the cuff and not afraid to be self-deprecating in service of making the other person feel comfortable. And so that's a lot of it. That's a lot of what we do. And then there is specific training in terms of like healthcare staff, because as soon as communities started seeing what our comedians were creating in terms of relationship with these people, they asked me to come up with training. Hey, could you help? Like maybe there are tools you could teach our staff. And so I had taught stand-up at UCLA for 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I had written the book about like taking comedians' tools out of the clubs and into your marriage. So I kind of put together a curriculum that was a synthesis of those two. And so I teach like 8 tools for the entire staff. Like that's my favorite, is we get like the laundry staff and the kitchen staff and the frontline workers and the executive director, everybody together learning, so that you really can change the culture, and allow for laughter to occur. That's really the goal.
Now, you founded this in 2019. And
it's actually 2018, by the way.
18, okay.
Yeah. That's okay.
So 2018, and of course in 2020, we hit the pandemic.
Exactly.
Over these years, how many individuals have you been able to work with, and how do you go about measuring the impact and success of the work?
Oh, great question. So probably thousands. Okay. When you factor in these communities that I've trained. And then during COVID, which you mentioned, obviously, seniors were the first community that was shut down. So we could not, it was like, that's our whole business. So I had this idea, I think it was March 6th, it was either the 13th I think it was the 13th, where it was like, no, you can't go in anymore. And so by that Monday, I created something called Lunchtime Laughter. On virtual, through Zoom.
Zoom, okay.
Which was crazy. I just decided that we should live stream, which was just funny because I didn't really know what I was talking about. But I have staff that are younger. And so they were training comedians using a camera in the office. And I was like, okay, well, if you can do that, then we can live stream. So we started doing Lunchtime Laughter. It was Monday through Friday, 12 to 12:30. And it was a Zoom link, and it was open to anybody, presumably for seniors and their caretakers, to give them a break, because everybody was like, oh my goodness, a lot of hours to fill when you're isolated. And very quickly, lots of people showed up who were perfectly lucid, who just wanted to laugh and feel less anxious. And so from there, we started thinking about, well, we could reach more people with this. And concurrently, there were all these articles coming out in Harvard Business Review and Forbes and The Atlantic and the New York Times about HR and how HR was so up against it with how do we keep our people feeling connected. And if there's one way to connect people, it's getting them laughing together. So we knew that.
Okay.
So then I started coming up with actual programs for corporate, for team building, morale boosting, connection, and simply like comic relief. So that's how that started. And then
that's great. Well, Dani, at the government level, and I know you talked about capital that you're raising, and we'll talk about more of that in a little bit. But I know that the federal government has really tried to put a focus on this disease, and Congress has passed bills allocating up to $3.5 billion this year, or I think it was 2019 actually, not this year, but 2019, through the NIH to address Alzheimer's disease. How have you tapped into, if at all, those resources to grow and expand your work?
Right. So we haven't tapped in specifically to that, although I was fortunate to get a PPP loan actually 2 PPP loans during COVID that were kept us afloat. But I think what's really fantastic about what this statistic and this amount of money is that one of the biggest challenges is burnout, is staff burnout. And so to be able to put money in to allow for more training and more people to populate this world, that is a tremendous gift. And I think additionally, you can't undersell the value of awareness and lessening the stigma. And I think that's also the value of where this money can be spent, is in bringing awareness of the vast population of people that are struggling with this and allowing for us to be really candid and forthcoming and in conversation about how best to handle it. So the more money you have, the more people you can engage in the conversation, and then the less stigma around the disease. Yeah. And that just allows for more creativity, more innovation, more research to take it on.
Yeah.
So.
Well, certainly, as we talk about obviously the federal support, which is important, but you've been successful in raising capital from private markets and investors. So share with us how you've gone about developing your business model, and what are your plans, and how do you plan to scale this work?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. What happened was, when that article came out in AARP and I had that tremendous response, simultaneously Time magazine had a dedicated issue on the science of laughter.
Wow.
So I had those two pieces of evidence of the demand. And I made, for some reason, a Venn diagram. And you, maybe from your economics background, that made sense. I still don't know how I even thought to do that. But I knew that, okay, so what do we need for this business to grow? We need people with Alzheimer's, got it. Comedians, well, yes, and money. And so, because I knew that it was going to be private pay initially. And so I did the circles and I found those communities. And then I went into a pitch meeting. I was given the opportunity to pitch to people who have a foundation and who were interested in using the arts for good, for social good. And so I went in with my little Venn diagram and my article, and I said, this is where I believe there's a huge opportunity. Nobody's doing this, and I have proof that it works. And so that was that's how I got that initial funding. And then we grew in those first couple of years. And then in COVID, obviously, we made this other pivot into corporate. And now recently, what's come up as we now expand and the whole world resettles as a hybrid work environment, and mental health is now like the number one issue that companies are facing and supporting. And so now we're growing into an employee benefits possibility.
Oh, interesting.
And that's what we're exploring next, is because we're already doing training. We're already just, if you want to party, we're like very able to do that and successful at that. But now it's taking it a step further and saying, you know what, laughter is actually healing. And so how can we make our programming and our engagement, which has such wonderful benefits of endorphins and serotonin uptick, oxytocin release, and connection and creating community. So how can we offer that as a benefit that employers offer their people in much the same way they offer yoga, meditation, and now do this 8-week workshop. We're going to offer you this to bring levity to all areas of your life for mental wellness and for health.
Yeah. Well, clearly the model is working. I know that I think Laughter on Call has now been used as a case study at Harvard Business School. I think you've guest lectured not only at Harvard, but also you've spoken at Fuqua, Duke's Business School, about your work. So tell us about those experiences and what you're able to share with the larger business community about this work and how they can benefit from it.
So that was really funny. The Duke lecture. So I mentioned that I wrote this book about laughter and marriage, right? And so they asked me to come and give a lecture or a workshop, really, for the spouses of people in the business school because of the pressure and the challenges of being in an MBA program. And so that was actually a couples workshop using the tools from the book. But here's the interesting thing. It's all transferable. It all works everywhere. Listening, showing up for each other, letting go of the moment before, asking for help when you need it, paying attention to timing, like all of these tools they're all transferable. They work everywhere. It's just maybe a different execution in terms of the games that we play.
Okay.
Right? So in a couples workshop, in a relationship workshop, we're going to play more intimate games, obviously, to illustrate the points than in a business workshop. A business workshop, we're going to talk a lot about yes and, which is an improv tool that literally you say yes and. It's not complicated, but it allows for people to stay at the table. It doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with what you're hearing. It just means yes, and I hear you, and I'd like to hear more. Or yes, and have you considered this? Right? Now, that is also very helpful in a marriage. Sidebar. Teenagers, sidebar. But it's particularly effective in business. So when we do the business tools, then they focus and we explain how relevant they are to innovation and confidence, building team morale, and comic relief, specifically in business. When I'm talking to couples, it's how can you stay connected? How do you keep the laughter going 20 years in? You know, how do you keep enjoying each other, right? So it's all the same tools of communication. That's really what it comes down to. It's the best tools of communication that yield joy. That have an end game of joy, which, you know, and in Alzheimer's, obviously, it was a little bit, I wouldn't say controversial, I think is too strong a word, but certainly an unexpected take to say that you can find laughter and joy in Alzheimer's. That would not be an initial reaction, right? What enabled me to say that, obviously, is the experience that I had with my mother, but also in seeing and in acknowledging that Alzheimer's is very sad. Nobody's going to argue. It's sad, it's long, but it's not sad every moment.
Right.
And that's really what we come in as non-family members, right? We can come in and we can capture those moments, and I can help families to capture those moments, to be present for the moments that aren't sad, where they actually can make a connection. And that's really the goal, is to alleviate some of the relentless feelings of loss.
Sure. No, that's amazing. You know, certainly over the last couple of years, Dani, you've hosted over 450 of these corporate events aimed at building cohesion amongst teams, helping boost employee morale, and simply experiencing healing connection that comes through shared laughter. You know, tell us about those services and how do companies find you? And are these Fortune 500s? Are these small, medium-sized businesses? You know, what's the range of companies that come after your services?
So it's a pretty big range, and yes, we've done a lot of Fortune 500. We do a lot of international events because it's great to bring your team from India on the call with your team from Ireland and Italy, and then 3 people in Wisconsin. For some reason, there's always somebody in Wisconsin on our calls. But it's a wonderful opportunity because the humor is generated in the room. We're not doing stand-up, so you don't need cultural references. It's really generated by interaction and games. And so what happens is you end up learning about these different cultures and creating community because they all work for the same business, but here's what our life experience is like, which is going to be different in India than it is in Italy. So that's why it's a really wonderful opportunity. And one of the few perks of COVID was that all this Zoom work enabled the CEO to be actually in the same, room, if you will, with people from around the world and to be interacting. So that's why that's been super effective. And then the training is really, I have 2 different acronyms. And again, it's like, okay, these are all the tools that allow for laughter to occur, right? It's not a stand-up class, although I do teach a corporate stand-up class. That's like a bucket list thing.
Okay.
But really what you want is to create a culture of inclusion where people feel safe and they can be themselves and be appreciated for who they are, not in spite of who they are. And all of that comes from the top down, from leadership kind of showing up and being willing to be a little bit vulnerable and maybe silly in the interest of creating community.
No, that's great. And, one of the things I want to touch on is that we haven't touched on yet is simply the economic development impact that you've had on the world of comedians here in Los Angeles. Everyone's a part-time creative or full-time creative doing something else. So, here we are during COVID, and of course, bars, restaurants, clubs, small venues were all shut down. So, here you have this enterprise that's growing and providing employment opportunity for comedians. So talk about the role of providing employment opportunities for comedians, how many you've brought into the system to carry out these services.
Honestly, I'm always applying for grants and accelerator things and all this. And I get asked, what are you most proud of? And when I reflect back over these 2 years, I have to say, that is what I'm most proud of. I'm so glad that we engaged in fancy Microsoft and Amazon and, I don't know why I'm talking in a funny voice about it, but, I'm proud of that. But when I look back, because we recorded all of those lunchtime laughters, and when I look back and see all the people who had work, I had 25 people working during COVID who I don't know how they were all restaurant, everybody does something else here, as you said.
Sure.
And they were of service. They got to use their talent to help people, and they made money. And it's so heartwarming to me. So at this point, we have about 30 comedians in rotation. And then I have one full-time person and 3 part-time people and a CFO. So we have a nice small group, and they're all very, very talented. One of my people is just out in a movie that she's the star of, which is crazy, that just won some award at South by Southwest.
Okay,
and
that's great.
She's, amazing at her job for me. So, I'm totally proud that this works and that it provides some support for the people I really care about. I really care about comedians and that they keep going.
No, that's great. Having gone through this experience and as you evolve this practice, let's think about, sort of the big picture, your thoughts on, aging in America, shall we say, not to get all philosophical here, not to get too deep here. It's only a 45-minute podcast. But, but since January of 2020, studies have shown that 400,000 or so nursing home and assisted living staff have quit, citing pandemic exhaustion as well as low pay and lack of advancement opportunities. Yet before the pandemic, America had already faced an elder care shortage. And we've got so many people turning 65, daily in this country. From where you sit, how do you view the challenges that we're going to face as a society in relation to, treating our elderly citizens, moi included?
Yeah, right. Well, it's so interesting. So I teach, one of the other things I do is I teach a memoir class to 85 to 100-year-olds. And giving them voice, that's another thing that got them through this pandemic, is that they felt seen and heard. And I think we have to begin to get away from the anti-aging. I don't even understand these products. We have to be pro-aging. What choice do we have? And so I think it falls in line with that whole awareness piece and being more generous and accepting and less shameful about it. We're all headed there. So being able to let go of the energy it takes to pretend it's not happening, I think will allow, again, for more innovation and connection and support as we all age. So I don't know if that's a solution, but that's just something that I feel listening to what you're saying.
Yeah, and there's no turning back. We all will age. But also, I think the other element that I'm really interested in, because we've had this conversation with a previous guest many episodes ago on in his case, Justin Michael Williams, we talked about bringing issues of mental health and wellness to communities of color in particular, and the work that he's doing. But, certainly as we talk about aging, we're also looking at this post-pandemic period and the whole issue of just burnout. And I think there was a New York Times article in which you were quoted which talked about the return to the office and employee mental health overall. And you said, and I quote, "So much of our humanity has been exposed, and there's no turning back. We can't put the genie back in the bottle." So what do you think? How do we deal with the new normal, and how do we sort of incorporate, just regularly into our lives mental health and wellness checkups?
Well, first of all, all the companies that I've spoken to are either hybrid or work from home at this point. So we're in your home. Like 3 days, maybe you go, when you're having these Zoom meetings or whatever, go to meeting, whatever, like I'm in your living room. I see your cat. I notice if next week your cat's gone. Yeah. Like there's no separation anymore, or very little separation between who you are and your work. And there's good and bad about that, right? So you still want to retain some privacy, but our humanity now has to be part of the work that we do, which actually is the good news, because that's how you get to hear different voices and really take in different points of view, because people are bringing who they are to their work. There's, it's interesting that show Severance. I think it's Apple Plus was Severance.
Okay. Don't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's about, when you, it's the idea being that you separate yourself, you do something to your brain so that when you're at work, you no longer remember your outside life. And when you're in your outside life, you have no memory of your work life. It's a total separation of work life. So it's kind of a parody of that, very satire. And it's interesting that it came out right now, because exactly the opposite has happened for those companies that are going to thrive. I know, for instance, at Microsoft, they can start a meeting with one word about how you're feeling. Go around, everybody say one word about how you're feeling today. Okay. Right? So that you take the temperature of your people, and as leaders, you also share some of who you are. And there's obviously the Brene Brown, bring your vulnerability as your strength. Yep. And
I love her work.
Right. And that is, we see that all the time, how valuable that is. And what it does is it allows for more creativity and more connection and more humanity. And that's what I mean about not going back, because we've had this 2.5 years of all of us going through a worldwide pandemic. Like everybody went through this. Everybody felt anxious at some point, some more than others. And so there has to be more sensitivity. I think that's what we've learned, and that's what HR has learned, that there has to be more awareness and sensitivity to where the person is emotionally so they can do their best work.
That's amazing. So, Dani, what's next for Laughter on Call? Where do you see this going over the next 5-10 years?
Oh my. I very much want for laughter to be in that same wellness space as yoga and meditation, like bringing people together and having specific games and tools and workshops, much the same way you run a series of poses in a yoga class to get that release and sense of connection with each other. So I think that's the overarching. That's why we're going into the employee benefits space and more training and training people to train, and really kind of keep thinking that's like the religion of laughter, but you can't really say religion. So the idea, you can say it, but this idea of really feeling passionate about the healing power of laughter and making sure that lots of people, anybody who wants it, has access to it, and not just watching a cat video, which, I know all that stuff is funny. I laugh at those little paw gestures. But there's something about connecting human beings with other human beings. So whether it's in the Alzheimer's space, which we continue to develop, and more training, and now we're back in person, so we do interactive storytelling, especially in the Los Angeles community, but also in all communities, in making sure that businesses appreciate, because there are amazing statistics about the value of laughter and a culture of levity, right? It's 41% lower absenteeism, 40% fewer quality defects. This is all because of 21% higher productivity, and all because of engagement. And if there's one thing that laughter does, it engages people. So that's my stump speech.
No, I appreciate that. But also, we've talked about your work in raising capital, all these corporate events, looking at adding this into the employee benefits realm, but also you're an entrepreneur now. You're a comedian, you're an author, a teacher at UCLA, but you're also an entrepreneur. So as we celebrate National Entrepreneurship, and particularly, the role and importance of female entrepreneurs, so many small businesses, went under during COVID. a lot of women and minority-owned businesses, but we're starting to see some bounce back. What's your advice for young or aspiring female entrepreneurs?
So the thing that I think is most important with entrepreneurship, and I think it's Simon Sinek, it's that why question. And what I've observed is when you have a personal investment, that is what will sustain you to go the distance. So you have to find the thing that you really care about. It can't just be like, I want to do this, like you because otherwise it's not sustainable. And it's something that I found when I was doing books. A publisher wants to know your passion when you write your book proposal because they know how hard it is. And they want to know that you have that fuel to keep going. And I think that's so true with being an entrepreneur. You have to have a personal investment and want and feel that what you are selling has value beyond the dollar sign. There's lots of opportunities for women right now because people are recognizing that women have great ideas and to get behind them. So I fund women. I got a grant through Johnny Walker. It's the Jane Walker Foundation. So that's something to pursue. They have a lot of support and a lot of, they give you money, but they also give you a coach. And so just to isolate what it is you want to do, have a vision, and then you can actually find, there is support for women right now. So the most important thing is knowing that this is something that you and only you, that's the other thing, you have to know why you, they ask you why, and then why you. So knowing why you specifically and who you are, what you bring that no one else can bring to this conversation.
No, that's great. So tell our audience, how do they find you? How do they get in touch with you? How do they sign up Laughter on Call to come to their corporate event or whatever else?
Oh, great. So just info@laughteroncall.com, or you just go to laughteroncall.com and you can read about our history and see our videos. And, we're coming into the holiday season. So we are very good at creating celebratory events where you don't have to leave your living room. And we make sure that everybody feels seen and heard and participates. We love the introverts. We love getting introverts to play. It's super interactive and joyful. So I would say the best place is just go to the website. If you want to reach me directly, I'm happy to tell you. I'm Dani, D-A-N-I, @laughteroncall.com.
Outstanding. So, Dani, this has been a great dialogue, and I really appreciate seeing you again after all these years and just hearing about the amazing successes that you've had professionally. So this has been great. On Civitas LA, we always invite our guests to share a final thought or closing comment or call to action.
The call to action, I would say, okay, here's my call to action. Let go of perfection. That would be my comedian's call to action. Give yourself the gift and allow for imperfection in every aspect of your life, and know that whatever imperfection it is, that actually could be the genesis of a creative idea you never, ever would have considered. So that is my closing thought. Let's all embrace imperfection because that's where the creativity is, and it's really where the funny is too. So that's my thought.
Excellent. Well, Dani, I look forward to seeing you on December 8th at Temple Israel of Hollywood. It's going to be a brilliant performance, I'm sure. And we look forward to having you back on at some point in the future and hearing about the great work that you're doing. Maybe we'll even have a comedic exercise for all of our Civitas LA family as well. Dani, thank you for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. And as always, to our audience, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you'll join us in 2 weeks as we look forward to another great civic conversation and continue our next installment celebrating entrepreneurship this coming month. So as we say on Civitas LA, until we meet again, stay strong and get involved.
Thank you.
And to learn more about Civitas LA and share feedback on this program or recommend future program or guest ideas, or to consider supporting our work, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com/support. And don't forget to catch us on social media on Facebook at Civitas LA Instagram at Civitas_LA, Twitter at Civitas_LA, and you can also find us on YouTube.